When the nation's top law enforcer becomes the president's personal weapon, the idea of justice itself begins to crumble. What Senator Amy Klobuchar exposed in that hearing wasn't just another political argument, it was a window into how power can twist the very system meant to hold it accountable. One by one, she laid out how orders were given, prosecutors were pressured, and careers were destroyed for refusing to play along. It wasn't rumor, it was evidence spoken aloud in the halls of Congress, and for a moment the room went completely silent. Because what she described could happen in any country where loyalty matters more than law, and it was happening here.
Justice Department to engage in political prosecutions against the recommendations of a career prosecutor. Maybe you think this is small. Maybe you all know that Comey will win this case, as he said himself, bring it on, go to trial. But to me, it is much deeper than that. Donald Trump posted on social media, and the whole world saw his instructions to the Attorney General to go after his perceived political enemies, including the former director of the FBI, who, by the way, was a Republican-appointed U.S. attorney, served a number of positions under Republicans, was my law school classmate, so I know a little bit about his politics. He ordered the Justice Department to go after the sitting Attorney General in the state of New York, and he even ordered the entire Justice Department to go after a member of this committee. And if that is not chilling to my colleagues and they don't care about this, I don't even know what to say anymore. Pam Bondi came before this committee, and I asked her questions about this, and she said to me, and these are her words, politics will not play a part in our decisions. Here you go. So when Donald Trump couldn't find someone in the Justice Department to bring the charges against Comey, he pushed out Eric Siebert, a conservative Republican, by Mark Warner's account, a prosecutor that was recommended by the Republican governor of the state of Virginia, and he installed a White House aide to overrule the career prosecutors. He is pressuring the Justice Department about whom to prosecute, rather than letting the career prosecutor make a decision about the facts and the laws. That's not justice. As former Trump White House attorney Ty Cobb said, we have a president for the first time in history ordering his AG to indict his enemies. And the AG, instead of being the independent force she's supposed to be, is saying, yes, sir. How can I get that done? Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor and conservative commentator, also said that this was a vindictive indictment, incomprehensible, and a mess. You know, I was a prosecutor for 8 years, ran a sizable office, and people would call, hey, don't go after that kid. Oftentimes the kid would be like 35 years old. And not once did I ever go to the career prosecutor and say, get rid of that case, don't do that, oh, have less of a sentence. Because when you cross that line, because you have had that kind of political pressure put on you, you can't go back. You can't go back. You took an oath to represent the government, the people, whether it's a state, whether it is the country, and not to represent, in this case, the president. And this is not happening in a vacuum. At the same time, the president directs investigations and prosecutions of his perceived enemies, he gives pardons to and rewards his friends. The administration reportedly shut down an investigation into border czar Tom Homan for accepting a $50,000 cash bribe. The president pardoned January 6 insurrectionists who assaulted police officers in this very building. And he pressured prosecutors to dismiss a corruption case against Eric Adams. It was Hayden Scotton who was the career prosecutor in that case, someone who had clerked for Justice Roberts and then Judge Kavanaugh. And he said this when he was asked to do the dirty work. He wouldn't do the corrupt work. He said, "You will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me." That's what this is about. And all of us, elected by our states, have to look in our own conscience and think, is this going to be me? Am I going to go along with this? Or am I going to say something about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very.
She began by recounting how a president had publicly posted his demands to the Attorney General go after his enemies. These weren't vague instructions whispered behind closed doors, they were broadcast for the whole world to see. The targets weren't strangers, they were people who had served under him, Republican appointees, career officials, even members of Congress. Imagine reading that order if you were one of those prosecutors knowing the weight of the presidency was being turned into a threat. Klobuchar reminded everyone that this wasn't politics anymore, this was power being used as a club. But what made her words truly cut through was that she wasn't speculating, she was describing conversations, testimonies, and firings that had already taken place. And as the Senate chamber watched, she exposed a pattern no democracy can afford to ignore. Her warning started with a simple contradiction. Months earlier, Attorney General Pam Bondi had appeared before the same committee and promised that politics will not play a part in any prosecutorial decision. It was the kind of statement meant to reassure Americans that the Department of Justice still stood on principle. But Klobuchar held up that promise like a mirror, comparing it to the reality that followed. When the president couldn't find anyone in the department willing to target his critics, those who resisted were pushed aside, and those who obeyed were promoted. The Attorney General's words echoed in the room, "Politics will not play a part," and for a split second, everyone could hear the irony. Because behind that phrase was a trail of reshuffled offices, rewritten memos, and investigations that disappeared the moment they became politically inconvenient. The facade of independence had cracked. Then came the story of Eric Siebert, a conservative prosecutor respected on both sides of the aisle and by all accounts a man of integrity. He was appointed by a Republican governor, known for his fairness, and even Klobuchar admitted he was a political opposite she respected. Yet when he refused to carry out the orders to pursue certain individuals without proper cause, he was gone, quietly removed. In his place came a loyal aide from the White House, someone chosen not for experience but for obedience. Klobuchar painted the scene with the calm precision of someone who had seen this before. You don't need to fire everyone to take control of the Justice Department, you only need to make one example. After that, everyone else gets the message. Her voice hardened as she said it. This is not justice, it's intimidation in a tailored suit, but even within that storm, not everyone surrendered. Klobuchar described one prosecutor who refused to be part of the corruption, Hayden Scotton, a career attorney who had clerked for Supreme Court Justices Roberts and Kavanaugh. When asked to dismiss a corruption case involving a well-connected political figure, he refused. His words became the moral centerpiece of the hearing. You'll eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me. The line hit like a hammer. It wasn't just defiance, it was a declaration that integrity still existed somewhere inside the system. You could feel the weight of it, not just in his courage but in what it revealed, that the request he'd been given was real, that the pressure was direct, and that justice was being bent for personal loyalty. Klobuchar held up his statement as proof that the rot had reached deep, but that a few were still willing to resist. She reminded the room that this pattern wasn't new or isolated. The same administration had pardoned individuals who stormed the Capitol and assaulted police officers. They'd quietly shut down investigations into corruption involving high-profile allies. And they'd pressured prosecutors to drop charges against others close to power. Each act sent the same message: the law applies to everyone, except the people at the top. Klobuchar's calm demeanor only made the message stronger. She wasn't shouting, she didn't need to, she simply listed the facts, one after another, until the conclusion became impossible to ignore. Justice had become conditional. Who you were, who you supported, and what you could do for the powerful determined whether you were punished or protected. As she spoke, she recalled her own time as a prosecutor. 8 years of leading cases where she says not once did she ever pick up the phone to tell a subordinate what outcome to reach. Her story sounded almost old-fashioned, a time when prosecutors followed the evidence, not the politics. "When you cross that line," she said, "you can't go back." Those words lingered. Because crossing that line doesn't just stain one case, it stains the system itself. She wasn't describing a moment of bad judgment, she was describing a structural collapse of independence. The Department of Justice was supposed to represent the people, not the person in power. Yet under pressure, that distinction had blurred beyond recognition. The hearing also revealed how far loyalty had replaced legality. Reports claimed that when certain prosecutors refused to bring the charges demanded, others were immediately elevated to ensure compliance. The message was clear: agree or disappear. It's a strategy as old as politics itself, but seeing it play out inside the justice system of a modern democracy was something else entirely. Even conservative legal scholars like Andrew McCarthy and former White House Attorney Ty Cobb, people who normally defended the administration, called the moves vindictive and incomprehensible. That bipartisan outrage gave Klobuchar's words even more force. This wasn't about left or right, it was about whether the rule of law still meant anything at all. The turning point came when she quoted Scotton's refusal again, this time directing it to every official sitting before her. "You will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward," she repeated, and then paused. "But it was never going to be me." The pause mattered. In that silence, the senators on the panel had to ask themselves the same question. Would they be the ones who stayed quiet, or would they draw their own line? Klobuchar's challenge wasn't rhetorical, it was personal. Every person in government faces that moment when doing the right thing might mean losing power, position, or comfort. And her entire speech led to that moral crossroad. What made the hearing so powerful wasn't only the accusations but the pattern of behavior it revealed. Investigations that threatened allies were shelved, whistleblowers were sidelined, loyalty was rewarded with promotions and presidential praise. Meanwhile, dissenters were punished, demoted, or replaced. The system that once prided itself on impartiality now looked more like a political machine. Klobuchar didn't have to invent drama, the facts were dramatic enough. By connecting each decision, she painted a timeline of slow erosion, how justice becomes a tool for personal survival instead of public service. Her argument was simple but devastating: when justice serves a single person, it stops serving everyone else. At one point she described how one investigation into a border official accused of accepting a $50,000 bribe was abruptly halted. No reason was ever given. Then, almost simultaneously, the same official received praise for efficiency and loyalty. To the casual observer, that might sound bureaucratic, but to anyone who's worked in law enforcement, it's a red flag. Rewarding silence, punishing integrity, those are the signs of a department under siege from within. Klobuchar's calm tone didn't mask her frustration. She knew what those choices meant. It meant fewer people willing to speak up next time. Fewer prosecutors willing to resist unethical orders, fewer voices willing to say no. And yet, despite all the revelations, she didn't end on despair. Instead, she turned it into a call to conscience. All of us, she said, elected by our states, have to look within ourselves and ask, am I going to go along with this, or am I going to say something? It was the kind of question that cuts past partisanship and lands in the heart of anyone watching. Because this isn't only about officials, it's about citizens too. The moment people stop caring about how justice is used, it stops belonging to them. Her challenge wasn't just for politicians but for every viewer. If you see something wrong, will you speak up, or stay comfortable? That's what makes this hearing stand out. It wasn't fireworks or shouting, it was quiet accountability. Klobuchar didn't come to grandstand, she came to remind the country of what's at stake when justice bends to power. Her measured tone gave weight to every word. Viewers could feel the unease building as she listed example after example. Each one was another crack in the foundation, and through it all she never once said it was about one man, it was about a system that had forgotten who it serves. That restraint made her argument even more devastating. Because when you strip away the politics, what's left is the question of whether laws still protect everyone equally. In the days after the hearing, clips of her testimony spread online, sparking debates across the spectrum. Some dismissed it as exaggeration, others called it the most important oversight moment in years. But what can't be denied is the emotion behind it, the frustration of a lawmaker watching the guardrails of democracy give way. When a senator says this is not happening in a vacuum, she's warning that what starts as selective prosecution can end as systemic decay, and she's right. Every time the law is bent for one person, it becomes easier to bend again. Justice doesn't collapse overnight, it erodes one compromise at a time. For viewers, the clip was more than political theater, it was a reminder of why oversight exists in the first place. A president can hold immense power, but that power is supposed to be checked by truth, law, and courage. Without those, everything else falls apart. Klobuchar's hearing brought that truth to the surface. It wasn't comfortable to watch. It wasn't supposed to be, because democracy doesn't survive on comfort, it survives on accountability. And accountability often comes from people willing to risk everything to tell the truth. By the end, the chamber was quiet. You could sense that even those who disagreed with her politically felt the gravity of what had been said. The integrity of justice isn't a partisan talking point, it's the line that separates a democracy from everything that comes after. Her message was clear: the Justice Department must serve the people, not the president. Prosecutors must follow the evidence, not orders, and every official must remember that power is temporary, but principle is not. So as that hearing fades from the headlines, the question she left behind still hangs in the air. When your conscience calls, will you answer? Because the erosion of justice doesn't start with a law being broken, it starts with silence. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the moments that shape our democracy. Hit the like button if you believe accountability still matters, and let us know in the comments, would you speak up if you saw justice being twisted? Because the answer to that question might determine the future of this country.